You can see my slides?
I can, yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our introduction to pathways. Our facilitator is Sandy Frost. She is a distinguished Toastmaster from the New Mexico Chile division, which we added last year. Please help me welcome Sandy Frost.
The district's mission is to build new clubs and to support all clubs in achieving excellence. Each of you is on your own Toastmaster journey in line with that mission. A key component to unlock that growth is the Toastmasters International Education System, which is called Pathways. Today, I'll tell you what it is, how it impacts you, and how it can help you meet your goals. In fact, what are the goals of people that join Toastmasters? Toastmaster International, or TI, looked into this last summer, and this is what members were saying. They want to become more effective speakers, build their confidence when they're speaking in public, improve their presentation and leadership skills. They want to network and build social connections. They actually said that over 70% of people had already reached their primary goal. So that's primary goals for Toastmasters. But today we're talking about pathways. So what do members like most about pathways? Well, there's some of the things that aren't too surprising. They help you develop your skills. They really like the variety of paths. But what stood out to me is that people like the idea that you can personalize and customize your path to meet the goals that you want to achieve. Something else that I really liked is this is some material that Anna's going to put in the chat, but they have some testimonials of people on how they're using pathways. The one that really stands out to me is Kate Arnold, who's still a city councilor up in Oregon. What she said is that a lot of the work they're doing is technical. And when she tried to share that with her folks, their eyes just glazed over and they checked out. She talked about how she was inspired by the path presentation mastery so that she learned how to convey her message with simple stories that people could relate to. So, Pathways is a key component of their education system. Again, TI did some research and they found out that adults learn best when they're in control of their learning environment. So, because of that, they came up with a modernized system that can help you achieve and meet your goals. It has learning tools to help you with things like videos, questionnaires, interactive quizzes to help you learn at your own pace. Some of the benefits of pathways. One that really stands out to me is that they realize that you just don't want to learn and develop skills that are only good in Toastmasters. No, you want to be able to transfer them out to the rest of your life, be it personal or professional. They also have frequent recognition of your achievements in the education program. As you're going through your path, you're awarded different badges that if you want, you can post those on social media. After you complete a level, you have the ability to print out a certificate. And in one of my clubs, they present this to the person that just achieved this level during one of our meetings. When you get to the higher levels of pathways, you can even request that Toastmasters International send out a letter of recommend or letter of accomplishment to your employer that they can as well celebrate in some of your achievements. They also have an online platform so that it's designed for your on the go personal professional life to help you develop your skills. Something else I really enjoy is they have engaging videos. I started Toastmasters in the 90s when all we had were manuals. So let me tell you, thumbs up for the videos. This is the path that we're going to use to learn about pathways. Let's start out by finding out, is selecting the path the easiest part of pathways? Let's begin with the basics. I keep throwing out this word path. What do I mean by that? Well, it's a specialized learning curriculum or program that helps you develop specific communication and leadership skills. Now, each path has 5 different levels with increasing complexity. You can think about it as a staircase, that as you're going through your Toastmaster journey, you're adding skills to your toolbox. Each level contains a number of different projects that focus on a particular theme. In fact, the level 1 theme is mastering fundamentals. Now, each project has a number of different activities to help you deliver a speech at the end of the project, usually to your club. So we've talked about a path. Now let's look into selecting a path. The default path in Pathways is called presentation mastery. Now, one of the things it really focuses on is how to help you become a competent communicator. And it does that by first helping you learn how to connect with your audience, then teaches you about how to select a topic, how to organize it, and how to deliver it. As I mentioned, the default path is presentation mastery, and we recommend that. Although, whoa, there's a whole bunch of other paths that are out there. And so as you're developing your skills, you might choose to develop additional skills. For example, there is one of the top leaders in our district that made a comment that said, "I'm not a very funny person." So that person decided to sign up for Engaging Humor to learn how to develop those skills. Another example is one dynamic leadership. Last year, I found out that I was both a club president and an area director. So I chose dynamic leadership because I really wanted to polish up my leadership skills. Just to be aware of, about a month ago, TI announced a couple more new paths called vintage paths. What these are paths that reach back into our history and pull back some of our early educational programs. And this was done by a request by a number of the members. You don't have to worry about that. Again, we recommend presentation mastery is a good default path because that really focuses on your communication skills, which is a common reason why people join Toastmasters. Now what I'm going to do is take that default path, presentation mastery. I'm going to do a little bit deeper dive on it. Remember how I said that each path has 5 different levels, and you can see those at the top. I mentioned level 1 has that theme of mastering fundamentals, but as you progress halfway through, the theme is increasing your knowledge. And then when you get to the top level, there you're demonstrating expertise. Now, this is an orientation class, so I'm really going to focus on the level 1 over on the left side of the screen. There are 4 projects in this level. The first one is the icebreaker. And here the goals are that you want to introduce yourself to the club and you want to start developing confidence speaking in front of an audience. The next project is writing a speech with purpose. Here you review or learn about the different ways of organizing your speech. For example, say you really love cats and you want to talk about the different breeds of cats. Well, that will be an organization style called topical. Another example might be, say you really love women's basketball and you want to talk about the 30 years of the Women's National Basketball Association, WNBA. Well, that would be more of a chronological or organizational style. There are other types of styles, such as spatial. Maybe you want to talk about Paris, France. There's one that's causal. Maybe you want to talk about some recent medical study. Or there are comparative. Maybe you want to talk about, I don't know, different types of breakfast cereals, something like that. The next project has to do with introduction to vocal variety in body language. The first goal is just to understand that by adding these techniques, it can really enhance your speech. For example, when you start learning about vocal variety, the first thing you learn about is pitch. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You also learn about tone. Oh man, I've had a rough day. Or you might want to talk about volume, how by emphasizing certain parts of your speech, that can really draw attention. When you get into body language, this is where you really can express emotion and attitude. I was recently at a speech where I saw somebody put their hands on their hips and they looked very sternly. And they described this as a power pose. Another speech I heard at our recent annual convention that was up in Golden, Colorado, one of the contestants in the International Speech Contest talked about their career as a nurse practitioner. Now, what she did is she began her speech by going over to the left side of the stage, and she talked about her first job on the ski patrol, where she was helping out injured skiers. Then she moved to the center of the stage and she talked about the early times in her career where she was still developing her skills. Then she moved to the right side of the stage and she talked about her career today and the practice she was in and the other physicians that she was working with. Using your body can really emphasize your speech. The last project I want to talk about in level 1 is evaluation and feedback. And this is a special speech, in fact, in the part that there's 3 different parts that you're going to work on. The first is you have to give a speech. The second thing is you have to listen very carefully to your evaluator because you need to incorporate some part of their comments into your second speech. Now, that speech can either be the same one you just did, or it can be another one. The third component of the evaluation and feedback project is that you have to do the role of evaluator. Something I want to point out is they're not asking you to do this role that requires a little bit more experience early on, like during your icebreaker. They wait until you gain some more confidence and develop the skills to be able to take on that role successfully. So those are the different projects in level 1. One question that you might have is, do I have enough flexibility in the presentation mastery path to meet my personal goals? To answer that, I'm going to talk about required speeches and speeches that are electives. If you look at the top of the screen, those bullets are required speeches. Like for level 1, those 4 bullets right there, you have to do those. But once you get to levels 3, 4, and 5, on the bottom part of the screen, you see electives. For example, in level 3, you have 14 different electives, and you only have to do 2 of them. Let me give you some examples. One is connect with storytelling. Recently, one of the gals in my club talked about how her and her husband took their bikes and they went down to the bosque or the forest in Albuquerque. And there was like a maze of different trails that they went on. They also talked about the critters they encountered, including a family of porcupine. Another elective that I heard recently was about halfway down, which is called Prepare for an Interview. One of my colleagues was going to be interviewing for another position. So what she did is she called up myself and one of the other members in our Toastmaster club and asked to meet with her on a Sunday night. What she did is she sent out the job description and then she used ChatGPT to generate some questions. And we interviewed her, to practice and develop the skills that were brought up in this project. Hey, good news, she got the job. Now let's look at level 4. There are a number of electives here. Say it's important to you to learn more about project management. Well, there's a project here on managing projects successfully. There are also a couple projects here. Maybe you just had the inkling to learn how to do a podcast or help develop your social media skills. Well, there are projects for those as well. When you get up to level 5, and again, remember now we're talking about this is where you're demonstrating your expertise. One of the projects I've done a number of times is called High Performance Leadership. As a division director, part of my job was to put on some of the speech contests. So I used this project to help my team guide themselves through it. Part of this project is you need to have an advisory committee. You need to meet with them at least 5 times. You need to do a speech to your club before the event and then one after the event. Another example of a topic is leading in your volunteer organization. Now, something I want to point out, when you get to this level, it's a good idea ahead of time to look at what are the different electives you have, because for leading in your volunteer organization, there is a requirement that for 6 months, you are either a leader in Toastmasters, something like an area director, or a similar role in another organization that you volunteer in. So hopefully that gives you a better idea of what the path is all about. So now let's put our hands on the steering wheel and let's learn about navigating through pathways. Now, most of you have probably received a similar email to the one I've got a little snippet of in the middle there. And it talks about you can log in one of 2 ways. Either one, you can use your credentials to make sure your username and password are correct, or if you join Toastmasters through the Find a Club, you already have an account created, so they've got a different link that you can use to log in. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the navigator. I believe Anne's going to pop that in the chat. This is a very comprehensive primer that talks to you about not only pathways, the basics of your club, but some more details about your pathways journey. Some of the things I'd like, I'm going to talk about that first tile, Welcome to Toastmasters. That begins, if you'd click on that tile, by talking about, well, hey, what do you get out of joining Toastmasters? There's a really good video by the president of the International Toastmasters, Aletta Rocha. And in the video, she actually jokes and she says that she joined Toastmasters to run away from her kids. She mentioned that she wanted a hobby that didn't rely on a role as a mother or as a wife. There's another really good video in there that has testimonials as to why people join Toastmasters, about a dozen different testimonials, including one by Darren LaCroix, who won the World Championship of Public Speaking. And when I use that, what that means, many of you are probably familiar with this international speech contest that we just conducted, where you first started out by somebody wins at your club, then you go area, division, district, and you keep going until the final competition is the World Championship. The next tile has to do with speeches and evaluations. And it answers questions about, well, when do I give my first speech? How do I deal with this fear that I have of public speaking? And when the evaluator gives me input, what do I do with that? The next tile talks about pathways. Covers a lot of the things I'm talking about, but just sort of bookmark in your mind that when I talk about there's a way to choose a path, there's a shortcut on how to get there through that tile. The last tile talks about expanding your journey. Now, most of us join Toastmasters and we've got like a specific goal or two in mind that we want to work on. And that's usually what people focus on first. But oftentimes you'll find as you progress in your club, you start looking around more and you think, how can I help other members in my club? Maybe I can be a mentor. A next step often is that people start poking out their head outside of the club. For example, maybe your club is struggling. It might be a good idea to go visit another club in our district or outside of our district that is a spectacular, stellar club, a Smedley Distinguished Club, and just see how they do things a little bit differently. You also might start thinking about, maybe I want to get more involved in these speech contests. Again, oftentimes you'll win in the club, but then you progress outside of your club. Another thing you might want to investigate is more the leadership skills. Here you might want to take on the role as an area director that supports 4 to 6 clubs, or what I'm doing right now, a division director, like I'm supporting my area directors in the Chile division. Up at the top, we have something, you might have heard the phrase the trio. Those are the top 3 leadership positions in our district. Like the lead person is our district director, Ruth Prentice. The person below that is Kim Angels. She's our club quality director. That's somebody that really focuses on education and training. And then there's Anup Kumar, who's our club growth director. He very much works on building new clubs and supporting existing clubs. So now that we've talked about pathways, let's more specifically look at the mechanics of choosing a path. The first thing when you begin this tool, you select what language you want to begin with, say English. But then the next step, you have a fork in the road. If you already know what path you want to go with, maybe that default path, presentation mastery, you can select that tile here. But if you still want to look into it a little bit more, you can select the pathways assessment. And what that does, it gives you a number of different slides where you have to answer some questions. At the end of it, it provides you some recommendations. I want to emphasize that. By taking the assessment, it's not locking you into anything. It's just saying, based on the answers to your questions, you might want to consider this path or these couple paths. Another thing, just to throw it out there, it's not a one and done. You can go through this tool as many different times as you want, because as you're going through your journey, your goals might change. Another thing I want to point out is, or talk about, is that first project, the icebreaker. Now, one of the first things is to get to the icebreaker project, what you have to do is log into Toastmasters. And later on, what we'll do is you haven't logged into this or you're having problems with that, the end of the presentation part of it, we can help you out with that. So at least I'll let you know right now, when you log in, one of the things that you can select is you can select My Home to get to Pathways. And what you see is a screen similar to this, and where you want to go is to the tile that says Go to Basecamp. And just as a comment, Anne is going to pass out these slides, so you'll have this as a resource later on if you want to use them as an aid. So again, after you select Go to Basecamp, you're going to see something like this. Now, mine is a little bit different because I'm working at 2 paths at the same time, but you probably see one after you select your path called Presentation Mastery. And again, that's the one we're going to dive into. Now, this is an overview. Again, mine looks a little bit different than yours, but at least I wanted to expose you that you can see here the 5 different levels. Remember, each path has 5 levels. I've expanded level 1 Something you might notice, those little green circles with check marks, that indicates that I have completed each of those projects, including that very last one that says I've completed, that's an indication that I've completed all of the projects. If you look below that, you see that levels 2, 3, and 4 have a green check mark. Now, I just haven't expanded those. You can do that just like I did for level 1. Those are collapsed. But you see at the time that I took the snapshot, I still had not completed level 5. So again, this is an orientation class, so let's dive into the icebreaker, the one with the blue star. One thing I really enjoy about Pathways is they've got a structure. Each project you go into looks very similar. They'll start out with a picture like this, got a picture at the top with a little blue blurb, sort of the about part of the project. Like for the icebreaker, it talks about, you've probably heard of icebreakers or done it before in other parts of your life. In fact, on Monday of this week, the Chile division is actually part of the Santa Fe Chamber of Commerce. So I went to a tri-chamber networking breakfast on Monday, and they had an icebreaker. And we had about 6 or 7 people around each of our tables, and we had, a couple minutes where we had to introduce ourselves and say why we were at this event. So that was a quick way just to get to know everybody and what they brought to the table. Now you're going to do something similar in the icebreaker, although your icebreaker is with your club. You're going to introduce yourself to them. Below that, they talk about different project resources, and these are things that can help you. They're sort of resources as you're going through the project. Each project is going to have different resources, but the ones that I'm going to point out are 2 that I use the most. Again, not that you have to, this is just my preference. One is the evaluation resource. What you can do is you can print out that PDF. I'm in a couple clubs that meet hybrid, so they also meet in person. And in that club, they really like it if I'm giving a speech, that when I show up to give my speech, I can have a copy of the evaluation resource that I can give to the evaluator. Each club varies, but that's one thing that I found useful in one of my clubs. The second thing is, although this is an online, Pathways is an online system, there are certain times when it helps to have a PDF of the project. And I usually get a copy of that PDF. And the reason for it is at the end of every project, there's going to be an interactive thing where they want you to fill out some questions on some of the knowledge you've learned in the project. Sure, you can use the back arrow to go back in one of the previous screens to, find the answer. But I just find it easier that I can just pull up the PDF and have the screen and just do it all at once. Again, just a preference I have, nothing required. Another thing that every project has is just an introduction, and then they talk about the assignment. Like this one, the introduction is where you're going to share something about yourself with your club. They also tell you how long the speech is. The icebreaker is 4 to 6 minutes long. And they also talk about that they present you with a couple ways of rehearsing your speech. Again, this is very much up to the person. Like I personally, once I'm done with this writing a speech, I like to stand up and just say the words out loud. Some people like to practice in front of a mirror. Other people like to practice in front of family or friends, or maybe your mentor. I also want to throw out, there are AI speech coaches out there that they can provide feedback as well. Just want to let you know, just be careful what you put out there. The next part is the assignment. As I said, you're learning the basic structure of a speech and how to deliver it. The other thing they point out, though, in the speech, the icebreaker, you have the option as to what style you want to use. If you want to deliver your icebreaker as a humorous speech, you can do that. If you want to do it informational or whatever you'd like, you have a lot of flexibility in this first project. Now, I also want to expose you to the type of interactive tools that you're going to see in all the different projects. One is something called assess and reflect. That's before they start the project, sort of the before part. They want to say, well, what do you know already in this topic area? And then what do you hope to get out of this? Like here, they say, I know my strengths as a communicator, and I want to learn about basic speech structure. Or in my case, like you see the little rectangle below, that's something that I filled in. I said, hey, I know that it's really important to use eye contact when I'm giving my speech, but how do I actually engage with the audience? How can I connect with them? As I mentioned, I really enjoy that they have videos. And something I want to point out, and Anne's going to put in some links in the chat that for the project 3 that talks about vocal variety and body gestures, they have 2 videos, and they're just a couple minutes long each. But in each video, they have one of the world champions of public speaking in that video. So you can see firsthand some of the elite skills that they have. Another type of interactivity you'll see is sometimes they'll give you a worksheet. Like I gave my icebreaker again recently, and I used this outline worksheet, but I was a little bit confused about what some of the parts are that I had to fill in. Well, if you just click on that little plus sign, it's like a tooltip. It gives you a little bit more information. Another thing in the icebreaker is they want to give you a little bit better idea about what types of evaluation there are. There's the verbal evaluation, like your evaluator, in your club. There's also the written evaluation. They're going to give feedback that way. Other clubs do something such as round robin feedbacks, where each, not only the regular evaluator gives you feedback, but other people in the club can give you feedback. So, I mean, that's interesting, but for each of these to get more information down in the right bottom corner, you can click on that and it flips around. It gives you a little bit more information. Remember, I talked about toward the end of each project, they're going to give you some questions and with just a blank spot where you have to enter information. And as I said, you can, just use, maybe you just remember everything perfectly. And that's great. I salute that. But I usually have to go back. And so this is where I'll pull up that PDF and just have it easily accessible so that I can fill this blank square out. Something I want to talk about is something that's at the end in every project. And there's actually 2 things you can do with this. The one that is something I do quite frequently is at the end of my speech, I go back in and I fill it out. Like I just gave my icebreaker, and it talks about this is the speech title. It's got a little tool on the right side with a calendar that, you can pop that in. Right below that, you can select the club that you want to give credit for completion of this project. I'm a member of a number of different clubs, so here I just select the one that I want to give credit to. I really want to point out the next one that is where you can select which evaluator evaluated your speech. Sometimes there are members in your club that have not joined Pathways, so their name will not show up here. Also, I give speeches in other clubs. So, and maybe they're not one of the clubs I'm a member of, so their name's not going to be in there. That's okay. This is optional. That doesn't mean you have to just stop right here. Their name's not there, that's fine. Then at the bottom, you could do save log. And what that means is on the right side, there's another place in Pathways that has achievements. And you can see that actually has a record. This is that log that you just saved. That talks about, that you had just completed the speech and some of the details on it. There is a second way that you can use this. See down at the bottom, there's something that says save an email. Now this, instead of after the speech, Say you want to provide some notes to the person that's going to evaluate you. See down at the bottom, it says request description. Say maybe I'm doing this speech and I want them to pay attention to how I'm transitioning through the different parts of the pathway or the path of pathways. So you can save and email that. However, again, it depends on if your evaluator is part of Pathways so that their email will be in here. But it's just another option. One other thing I really want to emphasize, once you've gone through the interactive part of it, you've rehearsed the speech, you've given it, and you want to say, whoo, I'm all done. To get credit for this speech, you have to go back into Pathways for this project, and there's going to be a button, Complete My Project. It's really important that you select that. In fact, I'm a club coach right now, and the club that I'm coaching, they do absolutely fabulous speeches. And each one, they want, lots of people want to give speeches, but they're not so good at going back in and completing my project. So they're not getting credit, which eventually will help your club out in the Distinguished Club program. So this is something you need to do to complete individual projects. But when you have completed all of the projects in your path, you have to come in, or in your level, you have to come in and you're going to have like a complete my level. You've got to click that button as well. What that will do is that will send that information to one of your club officers, and it's usually the vice president of education that will look at it and give their stamp of approval on it. Then that will send it to Toastmasters International, and that's how you get credit. And once they do that, you're going to get an email from Toastmasters International that says, congratulations, you just completed this level. So now that we've talked about selecting the path and going through the different parts of pathways, let's talk about actually scheduling that first speech, the icebreaker. Back on October 22nd, Pathways International or Toastmasters International introduced a new requirement. Before the icebreaker, they want you to participate as a tabletop speaker. Now, that doesn't mean you're the one that asks the questions. It means that somebody in one of your meetings has asked you a tabletop question and you've responded. The reason they've done this, again, they're trying to build you up for success. They want to give you a little experience of talking in front of an audience before you actually do your icebreaker. Another thing that you should do about this time is to make sure that you have a mentor. And different clubs do it differently. You might have a mentor already. If not, you might want to talk to your vice president of education to see who would be the right person for you to help you answer a lot of questions as you're going through the process. Now we're going to talk about taking all this information, these skills that you're developing, and using it outside of Toastmasters. Fairly recent manual they came out with, and I think Anne's going to pop this in the chat, is something called, how to make club meeting rules build real world skills. What I love about it is all of the different roles that you've got in your meeting. It says, what are the skills that will help you in Toastmasters, but what are the ones that you use outside of your club? For example, say you're taking on the role of Toastmaster. Well, in your club, it usually starts, one of the officers will give you the agenda. Once you've got that, you probably want to coordinate with both the vice president of education to find out who's doing the different roles, as well as the general evaluator, since they have like a sub-team within the meeting. Once the meeting starts, you're the one that sort of sets the tone and makes sure that you have transitions until the end of the meeting, which at that point you thank the people, the members and the guests for participating in the event. So that's what you do in the club as the Toastmaster. what type of skills are you going to pull out of that to use in the rest of your life? Well, there's definitely organization. There's management of both time and meeting. You've definitely been communicating and preparing with people. You've done public speaking skills. And I don't know about your club, no matter how hard we try to make sure we've got all the roles, there's still a little bit of hubbub that goes on in the beginning of the meeting just to make sure that, oh gosh, maybe a meeting came up and somebody couldn't be there for this role. Can somebody else take on that role? That really teaches you flexibility and adaptability. It's a wonderful skill to be able to use in your life outside of Toastmasters as well as in. Another thing I like about every project is pretty upfront. It says when you're doing this project, these are the core competencies or skills that you're going to develop. Won't go through all of them, but in the icebreaker, you're going to learn about basic speech structure. You're going to learn that balance and spontaneity when you're delivering your speech. Like for your icebreaker, we don't want you to memorize the whole thing, but you might want to go through your introduction and conclusion a little bit more to be more comfortable with that. So those are the competencies. What are the skills that are transferable outside? For your icebreaker, possibly some of the skills are communication with clarity. Maybe another one is confidence under pressure. And you're going to get evaluated, right? So maybe that active listening kicks in. So I've talked to you today about what Toastmasters is and how it's such a key centerpiece of their educational system. I've tried to talk to you about they have skills that can be customizable to the ones that you want to get out of it for communication and leadership. Another thing I love about it is they designed it so that you can learn at the pace that you want. Pathways is a wonderful system where it can unlock a lot of the skills and goals that you want to achieve to help you hit the finish line. So at this point, I'd like to open up for any questions that you have.
Do many members follow pathways?
Did you say, do many members follow
Yeah, do they follow
pathways?
steps that you're talking about?
Yes, I'd say the majority of the people do join pathways. Let me give you an example, though, as I joined a club that has been around actually since 1969. And the club has gone through different phases. And there are some members, and it's incredible. They've been in Toastmasters for many decades. And some members have chosen that they don't want to participate in pathways. So that's an example of where some people just, they've been there for a long time and they've just chosen not to be a part of it. But I find that it's something that it's well thought out. It tries to be adaptable to the way that most people learn. And it's a very good way that I've found to get the most out of trying to develop the skills to help you meet what you join Toastmasters for. Does that help out? See, Jen, would you like to ask a question?
Yes. So can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I joined a group and I've actually already given my icebreaker.
Woohoo! All right.
Well,
Right.
I didn't know about this
Oh, that's okay.
meeting.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
And I've already also been an evaluator.
Oh, cool. All
And,
right.
they said I did a good job. Um,
Great.
I guess my question is because I was going through this information that you were doing about the pathways, and I guess I'm confused because now I have to um, pay for each pathway that I go in.
So the first path that you do is free. You don't have to pay for that.
Okay.
But once you go, I mean, this is an excellent question. Once you go through level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, you're done. And some people choose to do another path. Like that's me. I finished one path, dynamic leadership, and I'm now doing persuasive influence. For that, I had to pay an additional $20. Just a heads up that recently they said that there would be a price hike. I think it's $35 for most of the paths. So the first path, you don't have to pay anything. That's already taken care
Okay.
of. Does that
Okay.
make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other question I have is I was having computer problems and I had a hard time getting logged in.
Yeah.
So will I be able to access the information again that you've already given?
You mean by the presentation? Yes,
Yes.
yes, and we'll send it out to you. And she's
Okay.
also going to, I think, put my contact information and I think maybe Anne's contact information. We very much welcome questions. So please, later on you're going through it and scratching your head or just like, oh, this is confusing what you were talking about here. Just please reach out. Previously, I've even set up meetings outside of this, to help somebody out. So,
Okay. Thank you for doing this.
all right, great. Thanks for the question. Are there other questions out there?
I know that you mentioned you went to other clubs. Are we welcome to just check out other clubs
Oh,
or do you have to
sure.
pay
Yes.
extra?
Yes. In fact, no, it's free. In fact, something just personally, I'm very interested. I'm a tech person, technology person, and I am just really intrigued by artificial intelligence. And I've even done talks on like AI and Toastmasters, and there are actually clubs out there that's their core being. They really centered their meeting around AI. And so I visited a lot. I visited one last night on AI and Toastmasters. Another area that I'm trying to learn about is Toastmasters, like the second part of the name, is international. One out of every two Toastmasters is from outside the United States. So I've started attending clubs that are internationally focused. And I'm learning so much about that. In fact, that was another one a couple days ago that I went to. And one of the people that was giving an evaluation talked about a prime minister. And one of the general evaluators' comment was that some people, they might not be familiar with that. And just maybe to elaborate, what a prime minister is. I mean, just, it's different ways of learning about public speaking. So. Does that
When,
help out?
yeah, when you mentioned AI, what's one thing that stood out that how are they using it in Toastmaster?
Oh, it's so cool. One of the things you've heard of the I counter role.
I'm that next week, so.
Oh, that's now. Oh, okay. What that is during the meeting, you listen for the use of filler words during the meeting. And I have been catching myself doing it. I will say so or so this or if I'm struggling instead of just being quiet, I'll say mm. Those are filler words. And what the role of I counter is that somebody just might not be aware that they're doing that. Another thing I tend to say is the phrase, People tell me that's my crutch. And so what the counter will do is they'll keep track of that information, and then at the end of the meeting, they'll give a report and say, but in fact, I was the leading contender. I did 6 odds in a meeting recently, which, sigh, I wish I didn't do that, but that helps me try and be more careful of it. So that's what an out counter normally does. But in this one club that I went to, they had the role of AI analytics counter. And they use this speech coach called Udemy. And that actually, there used to be a partnership with Toastmasters for a while on that. And so what they did is there was still a person in the loop, but they also had Udemy running during the meeting. And not only could they as well count the use of filler words, but they could notch other words that maybe were weak words. They could point out areas maybe could have been more concise. So it gave you a much more detailed analytics of what you just did. Another thing that I find really useful is when they do their presentations. What people talk about are the different tools that they use to spruce up their PowerPoint presentations. I used to, and I think my default style is I tend to do it the old-fashioned ways, but now you can use a prompt that can help you design different slides. So that's another example. One other we thing is that recently we have to do things part of the educational series. There are things like the Better Speaker series, Club Success series, Leadership Success, and they have some default PowerPoints with that, but there's not a lot, they're sort of bare bones. And in one of these meetings, they showed how you could take one of those existing presentations and with a couple prompts, you could spruce them up a little bit more. Does that help out a little bit?
Sandra, there's a question in the chat from Anna Hopkins.
Anna, I don't see the chat right now. Maybe I can.
Okay, if you join, I'll read it. If you join more than one club, can you put one level of pathway to count for club A and a different level of that same pathway to count for club B? Or do you need to keep the progress in the path with, and I have to read the rest of it
No,
here.
you can spread the wealth. You can spread the wealth. You can say level 1 for this club, level 2 for another. Just as a comment, Ann and I was in a meeting yesterday where somebody wanted to do the presentation mastery path twice in one Toastmaster year. And one Toastmaster year means from July 1st of a year until June 30th of the following. And I didn't know the answer before that. And here's a good example too. I reach out to Toastmasters International almost weekly asking them questions. So I asked them the question, and within about an hour, it's not always that fast, but I got a response. And they said, you could do presentation mastery twice, but you only get credit for it once in a Toastmaster year. So again, that's something I really want to encourage. You can call up their number, you can send them emails, and they just expanded their hours. They are now open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. during the week. Used to be, I think, more like 8 to 5. And they're very helpful. Any other questions? Marie?
Hi, thank you for all the information. I just recently joined about maybe 2 weeks ago, and I wanted to ask. I want to have a mentor, but what are the qualifications in a mentor, and who do I ask about getting a mentor?
So there are two different types of mentors. One is more informal. In fact, one of the clubs that I was in, we didn't have any way of assigning people mentors. And that's something I wanted to do, especially the new people coming in. So we started an informal mentorship program. And it was people, sometimes an easy one is somebody that told somebody about the program initially. That might be an obvious person to be a mentor. Somebody else might want to learn more about a certain aspect of Toastmasters, maybe contest or something like that. So maybe the vice president of education, or maybe somebody in the club knows a lot about contests. That might be a good matchup. There is also a more formal way that takes about 6 months or so that you can go through and pass pathways, or to go through in Toastmasters as well. And if you don't know anybody in the club yet, I would start by going to your vice president of education and asking them. And if they don't know, they at least can point somebody to the next, point you to somebody else. That's a really good question to ask, because that's when I started way back. I had so many questions. These roles are completely foreign. What the heck do they do?
Thank you. I have one more question.
Sure.
And I noticed in our Toastmasters group, there's not a counter. If I wanted that for my speeches or, for my personal growth, can I request that, or how does that work?
Sure. And each club is a little bit different, but that's a good point. In one of my clubs, we do not have an out counter, but we include that in the role of grammarian. So that would be a good thing. And what you might want to do is, and again, each club is a little bit different as to how they schedule out meetings. There are clubs that schedule out a year in advance all of their meetings. There are clubs that do it 2 weeks in advance. Oftentimes, a lot of clubs will, at the end of one meeting, the very last couple minutes, they'll do it that way. So if you don't know who the grammarian is coming up, maybe talk to your president or your vice president of education would be good. And that's really, I think you just nailed something. Remember when I was showing that thing where you can send a question or describe something to your evaluator, things you